Reading about Ukraine, I imagine that you have a type of problem very similar to that of Latin America. The changes we introduced since the 80s and the 90s to full market economy, to full democracy, have brought something that, with which Latin Americans are not very pleased. Most Latin Americans today think that the problems of Latin America are because of democracy or because of the market economy. They don't think there are the persons who deal, the politicians, the governments, who have the responsibility. Is the model or is democracy? And that is totally false. We fail most of the times not because of the things we do, but because of the things we do not do. And in the case of Ukraine, I am sure that the reforms that this country needed have not been delivered, and that is the reason you have so many trouble. And one of the problems with freedom of speech is that that is not something anyone can bring to you. It's an institution. It's capacity building. It has to come out of you. It's a right you have. It's not something that the government does. It's a right, and you have to fight for that right. That is the same story of Latin America. There were a lot of expectations after World War II, the UN Declaration of Human Rights, the Inter-American Declaration of Human Rights of all the countries of the America, including the US, and then now Canada. But the Cold War destroyed everything, or destroyed democracy in most countries. We have military dictatorships, some of them supported by the US. The military became very powerful. And in the countries where we had democracies, the fear of communism and many other things made freedom of speech something that was not really freedom of speech. Of course, after the 80s, things have changed a lot. We now have a lot of more freedom of speech in Latin America. We have built up internally and externally institutions. We have the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, which play a very important role in bringing down dictatorships in Latin America. And it was a governmental institution. It was the Organization of American States institution, but the members were independent, and they did a very good job. We have Inter-American Press Association, who has done a very good job, particularly in freedom of the press. Now we have a rapporteur of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights working only of freedom of expression, and he visits all the countries and looks at all the cases. And we also have the European Union statements. We have the US Department of State statements. We have a lot of international vigilance. And of course, we have to work internally for freedom of expression. It's very important to understand that freedom of expression is also freedom of thought. And that's what the Inter-American Declaration of Human Rights is. Freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom of information. That's the most important thing, information. That information flows. There is no limitation to information. That we don't have censorship. That is something that disappeared in Latin America. Censorship, no. Press is liable for the things it says, but you cannot have censorship ever for any reason. Of course, it's something you have to balance with the right to privacy, with the right with national security, but even those things have to be taken in a way that doesn't limit freedom of expression. We like what the US did with the First Amendment. You should not abridge freedom of expression. And we follow the US court, the US Supreme Court statements of freedom of expression for our readings of what should happen in Latin America. And that's what we are doing today. And we are fighting for freedom of expression everywhere. The Inter-American Press Association says something which is very interesting. The best law is no law. it's a libertarian attitude, but yes, it's very risky to have laws on the press, on media, on property of the press, on what is objectivity. All those things always end up limiting freedom of expression. Governments, of course, don't like criticism. But freedom of expression is about criticism of the government and of the private sector and of criminal activities of many things. Nobody wants to be criticized. But that is a very important right, probably the most important right. The right to criticism, to exchange ideas, to fight, to protest. Through the Cold War, it was very difficult to protest. Everything was mixed with communism and conflicts would militarize, social conflicts. Today, it's different. There is a lot of respect for protest. There is the right to protest, and that is something in which we have advanced a lot. No army ever will kill protesters, as it happened in the past so many times, until very recently. There are several countries that are trying to put controls on freedom of the press and freedom of expression. Some countries that are talking about socialism 21st century. Venezuela, which is limiting a lot, particularly on television networks, but also on press, is putting a lot of pressure, buying media, canceling licenses. We also have problems in Nicaragua. We also have problems, significant problems, in Bolivia, a little bit, or not a little bit, in Argentina and Ecuador. But everybody is looking at that, of everything the government does to try to interfere or to try to check or to try to buy or to try to put threats on people. We have another problem now, and it's crime, narco-traffickers, killing journalists, and that is becoming a very serious problem for journalists also. Thank you.